wanna stay ahead of the curve, then follow my words. All we do is teach, train, innovate, solve. Yeah. Teach, train, innovate, solve. If you wanna be ahead of the curve, then follow my words.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone, to TTIS, where we build confident, empowered educators through empathy, strategy, while giving you practical tools that you can use today. And tonight's topic is a very good one. It is functional performance. What really do we mean when we're talking about that? And I'm going to preference the exam that we're spotlighting, which is 186, SPED 186. But I'm going to start a little bit different today. And I'm going to start with a scenario, because that's how your exam wants you really to be able to assess your understanding. So you're sitting in an art meeting, the evaluation report is thick, IQ scores are listed, reading percentiles are highlighted, and the behavior data is summarized. Then someone says, let's review the student's present level of academic achievement and functional performance. And everybody nods. But here's the quiet tension. Academic, we understand that. Reading levels, math fluency, writing samples, got it. Functional performance, though, this is where some teachers pause. And if we're honest, some of the SPED 186 candidates miss questions because they treat functional performance like extra behavioral information instead of what it truly is. And so tonight, we're going to slow this part down, not just for the test, but for practice. Because on SPED 186, functional performance is not optional language. It is foundational thinking. It's not just vocabulary terms that you have to memorize. I think that's sometimes where people get stuck. But it is a lens in which the exam expects you to think through. So we're going to think through some of that tonight. So our agenda, what the law actually requires us to do and to know. And we're going to define functional performance. I'm going to do a very general one to help you to get it, and then I'm going to show a very defined one. Academic versus functional, and do a comparison. I'm going to lead it into some scenario practices so they help you to define and to really understand this concept. And finally, we're going to talk beyond the test, because you are going to be a specialist, a professional. And for those who are not preparing for this test, but need to know more about the inclusion students in your class, this is going to be great information. So under idea, we have to make sure that we're following the IEP, and it has to include PLAAFP, which is the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. Notice the pairing. Academic achievement answers the question of what does the student know and do in the content area, while functional performance is going to land on questions like how does the student function in everyday school environments. Functional performance includes the skills that allow a student to access, participate in, and benefit from instruction. And that's where idea really locks in. So my graphic is really that. It's not just about behavior. It's not just social skills. And it's not just discipline data. It's how students navigate the demands of school. And the exam expects you to understand this difference. Later, as I said before, we're going to dive deeper into some clarity between the two, academic and functional. But let's define functional performance plainly first. Before I get into this detailed definition from the TEA. So functional performance refers to non-academic skills that impact a student's ability to learn and participate in school activities. A few examples that I can think of and present to you are things like communication skills, social interaction, emotional regulation fits here. And is it an attention or an executive functioning issue? Is it organization issue? Self-care in a school setting? Mobility lives here, task initiation and completion, and transitional skills. So a few facts that I want to throw out. If it affects access to instruction, it belongs in a functional performance. If it affects independence in school, it belongs in functional performance. And if it affects participating in the educational environment, it belongs in functional performance. And so now I'm going to dive into this comparison that I was discussing with you earlier. Because again, it's going to help you with your understanding of clarity as you answer these questions. Now I want to list a few examples for each just for clarity purposes, because again, my focus is to make sure that you walk away with a clear understanding of what functional means. So I'll compare the two. Academic will say something like reads at third grade level, solves one-step equations, writes a 5-sentence paragraph. But functional may sound a little like this: struggles to transition between activities without adult redirection, having difficulties interpreting peer social cues, cannot independently organize their materials, or even they may become dysregulated during unstructured time. And here is the test connection I want you to make. This exam will often present a scenario with academic behavioral data or executive functioning data. And if you cannot clearly distinguish between academic performance and functional performance, you are likely to eliminate the correct answer instead of the distractors. So I want to ground us in actual language that the TEA agency glossary submits to us. And it's a long definition. What I will say is that we're going to share this glossary this week via our mailing list and our free community, SPED community that we've started. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let's jump right into this definition for PLAAFP. It summarizes the current strengths and needs of students in both academic and functional performance areas. It tells us that it must include how the student's disability affects the student's involvement and progress in the general education curriculum, regardless of the settings. Now, remember, this is a portion of the IEP. And notice what the TEA centers around. Not just strengths and needs, not just scores, but how the disability affects involvement and progress in general education curriculum. Now, that phrase is foundational because functional performance is about involvement and progress. And I want you to take note of something else powerful regarding this definition. It speaks about school-age students and preschool age. But the PLAAFP may describe the student's current instructional level compared to their grade level TEKS. And if the student is below grade level, it may describe the prerequisite skills needed to achieve grade level proficiency. This is where testers sometimes get tripped up, especially if the only thought is that the PLAAFP is just going to give me what the student's reading level is. Say the student reads at a third grade level. But the TEA really expects you to make connections that aren't directly stated. So I've devised a few questions for you to ask yourself. One, how does this impact access to grade level TEKS? The second one, what prerequisite skills are missing? And then the third one, what does the student need to participate meaningfully? These questions help with our functional thinking embedded inside academic language. Because this is not an exam that tests surface level, but it's testing your true understanding of how these terms are applied. And functional performance is not just test vocabulary. So let's put it in action. I'm going to present to you a few scenarios. The first one is a middle school student with ADHD reads on grade level. However, he's failed 3 classes due to missing assignments. And the teacher reports that he loses materials and forgets deadlines. So what's the functional issue? Because it's not reading comprehension and it's not decoding. Those would be academic. It's executive functioning. It's organization. It's task completion. Those are the issues. Okay, let's try another one. An elementary student with autism completes math accurately, but refuses group work and leaves the area when peers approach. What's the functional issue? Because the academic ability is intact. The functional need here is social communication and peer interaction tolerance. And then I want to make sure that I give one for each level. Here's a high school one. A high school student with OHI becomes emotionally dysregulated during schedule changes and requires removal from class twice weekly. What's the functional need? Self-regulation and transition coping strategies. And notice the pattern through all 3 levels. The pattern in these that I gave you is that their academics are not the hindrance. It's their ability to cope with school setting. And functional performance describes the barriers between the student and the successful participation. I won't have time tonight to cover how to write a functional performance statement correctly, but keep an eye out for some help on our social media pages. And so I dare to discuss with you how to jump beyond the test, because you are preparing to be a specialist at all levels of special education. And as I said before when I started, if you're a new or novice educator and have inclusion students in your classroom, then these are keys to help you to understand the process when you're sitting in ARDS. I know that this topic tonight might feel technical, and after a long day of working, wow, Ms. Gibson. But my plan really here is to empower you. When you understand functional performance, you start identifying access barriers. You learn to advocate clearly in ARD meetings, and you write stronger goals. And that builds confidence. And when you're sitting at the exam and you're reading these scenarios, hopefully you're not immediately looking for only the academic deficiencies. But tonight, I want to offer these thoughts to help you to train yourself to ask some important questions. As I presented to you before, but my final one is, what is preventing this student from accessing instruction? And that question, golden. So if this session helped to clarify functional performance for you, I want you to go back and I want you to practice your questions this week or this weekend and really label them. Before you look at any multiple choice things, label. A for academic, if that's what it's talking about, or F for functional. This will help you to train your brain to separate them, and it will make a world of difference. And if you're preparing for SPED 186 and you want a study that's aligned to the exam, what it's going to evaluate, whether it's functional performance or it's data, our Texas Blueprint session is going to be linked below. That's where we identify your focus areas and we build a structural plan just for you. Because not all of these terms are surface level. Case in point, tonight's conversation around functional performance. It's not just vocabulary for this test, but it's going to reflect your professional thinking and how you analyze your students' needs. And as always, I want to thank you for being present, fully tapped in as we go through various pieces of the competencies that I know are going to be on your exam. You are absolutely capable of mastering this exam, but the key is knowing what to focus on. So keep showing up for your goal and keep knowing that I'm going to be here every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time to help you get closer to that. Now, tonight was all centered around SPED 186. And for the next couple of weeks, I'll be honest, that's where we're hanging our hat. We're going to be talking about domains 1 through 4. And then we'll have a cohort that's available for domain 5, which is the newest of ones. Writing about what I know about the student. But I wanted to just make sure that I gave out some information for you tonight. And as always, I'm thankful for you arriving here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our material information, and join us on our various social media pages. But thank you again for being all in tonight, for crushing your goal. And I'll see you again next week. Good night, everyone.